welcome to our Humanists MN November Community Gathering. My name is Audrey Kingstrom. I am on the board of Humanists MN and the volunteer program coordinator. Ellie Halen, who is our president and usually is up here welcoming people at our community gatherings. She's our president, has got a nasty eye infection this morning, so we wish her well. So thank you all for joining us today, and a very special welcome to new people or visitors. We're so glad you're here. I think it's obvious that we are renting space here at First Unitarian Society. Most of you know that. And as sort of evident in how you're seeing the space today, for those of you who've been here before, is they are undergoing some renovation of this space. Last time we were here, there were pews screwed down. They are gone. They've taken up the floor, and a new one will be installed in a few weeks, I understand. And they are ordering new chairs, upholstered, hopefully more comfortable than pews, that will be arriving, I don't know, 2 months, January, maybe January, February, we'll see. You never know. When it comes to furnishings, I don't know. Anyway, so we always like to start with a little crash course about our organization and our worldview as humanists. Our organization, Humanists MN, is a secular community for ethical living, and we are committed to the well-being of the sustainability of all and the well-being of all and the sustainability of the planet. We are a home for those looking for a community of naturally curious, compassionate, and rational people. In short, we believe you can be good without a God. We are a very active organization. We organize primarily using Meetup because it's cheap and easy and does a lot of the work for you, so you don't have to have so many volunteers. So do join us there to see our wide variety of upcoming events. Currently, we are an all-volunteer organization, a nonprofit, 501c3, and we depend on the service and generosity of you, our members and friends, to further our mission. If you are not already a dues-paying member, we encourage you to take that step. And you can do that and learn more about us on our website, humanismn.org, or at the table in the back after the program. We have a lot of opportunities for people to be engaged along with coming to our programming. And again, at that back table during social time, I hope you'll check out our sign-up sheets to see how you can get more involved. A little bit of housekeeping. The restrooms are out the door here, center doors, to your left down the hall, or there's 3 gender-neutral bathrooms down that hall. But if they're full and you really need, you can go downstairs, again to your left, and there are more bathrooms. After the speaker and the Q&A session, we'll have a reception right here in the back of the room, and we'd love for you to stay and socialize. We'll be providing food and drinks, and we encourage you to, again, put a little something in those jugs we have sitting out to help us cover our costs. Also a disclaimer that there might be photos today. There's definitely our streaming and our video that will be on during our whole program that will be used for promotional and marketing purposes in the future. Just so you are aware of that. All right, now we have a couple other announcements before we get to our speaker, and first up is our Vice President, Mitch.
Okay, so first of all, there are pews up there if you still really want to sit in a pew. I know some people really like the pews. So. And in the spirit of the thing today, the improv, I'm winging this because I didn't know I was going to speak, so we'll see what we get. So I'm here to talk about our fundraising campaign, which is to hire a part-time staff person. And this is a big undertaking that we've decided to partake in. And it's kind of starts with, there's a brochure in the back, and in that brochure there's a little graphic that says in 2022 we had 282 members. And by 2024, we're up to 420 members. That's a pretty dramatic increase. And we believe that in the political environment that's about to take place, there's going to be a lot of interest in what humanism does. And as Audrey spoke about, we are an all-volunteer committee, and it's hard to keep pushing that rock up the hill and expand this, because we want this to be 420 or 800 people over the next 4 years. And so we're trying to raise funds to get a part-time staff person and see what that does for us and see where that takes us. So if you have the capacity to help with this fundraising campaign, please grab a brochure and make whatever donation you can. We believe that if we can get this first step done, it will help us create that to become something that's a permanent part of our organization. And then we're on the way to the next level of what Humanist MM can be. I was at a recent board meeting, and I believe Audrey brought up that around the country, we actually are seen as a model of what a humanist organization can be. And I think we can keep taking the lead and keep going with this. And again, it just takes some money. We're trying to raise $50,000. We currently, we put in 10 as a board, and so we want another $50,000. So if you can help with that, or you know somebody who can help, if you know somebody really, really wealthy who could help, that would be great. So, I'm done with that. But if you have any questions, just come up and talk to me or any board member. I forgot my lanyard, as I always seem to do. But Christine Rutqua, I always have trouble with her last name, is going to come up and talk about, and Marcy, about humanists in action. So thanks.
Woohoo on we're seen as a model. Is that amazing? That I'm thrilled. I don't need a spotlight, but doesn't that feel good that we're doing something good for people here? I'm Christine Rutqua. I and my wonderful, I had Marcy come up just because she's so awesome, co-chairs of Humanists in Action. So I hear that maybe people want to be doing good things in a community, help ensure that we are having a safe and thriving community and world. And that's what Humanists in Action is about. We kind of have two angles. One half is legislative, and so what can we do? What can we do? Well, if you're not sure how to contact your U.S. delegation, we can help you find information about that. You can take action. For example, there is actually a bill out there, and talk to us after if you need to, that is looking to make nonprofits terrorist organizations without much vetting. So please come to see if you want to know more about that, because we need to make sure people vote against that. The other thing is, while there is a lot of concern at the federal level, the states and local governments can do a lot to help ensure their residents are doing well. And that is where Marcy and I work very hard during legislative session each winter to help everyone like you know what you can do, what bills you can advocate to support for, what ones you say don't vote for this, rallies you can go to. That's what we do. So action, that's what makes us humans feel better, when we can do something about something we're concerned about. So there is a list on there for it's a separate newsletter. This is the activist newsletter. So please come sign up for that if you haven't been getting those. And the last thing, the other half of what we do is community service. So kind of immediate action, work on projects, all kinds of good things, helping gardening, all kinds of good stuff. I will let you know there's an annual drive we do for Bridge for Youth, and they help unstable house youth, young adults also. So let's help those folks, many of whom are in the LGBTQIA community, and we know there may be some sad things happening. So hopefully you got the email from Meetup about this activity. I'll send another reminder in the email. So we can do things to help our world be a good place. Thank you. And now next up is board member Paul Rupp.
All right, welcome everyone, and a special welcome to this month's speaker, Tane Danger. Welcome. You. My name's Paul Rupp. I'm one of the newest board members, so it's really exciting for me to be able to announce an event that we have coming up, and I get to announce this on behalf of the board, so I'm really excited about this. And I want to urge everybody to mark their calendars. In January, we have an event that's going to be celebrating the National Religious Freedom Day. And this is a day that is meant to mark our First Amendment protections, which give us both freedom of and freedom from religion. And hopefully that's a day that helps all of us and of all of our lawmakers remember that that's a day for everybody. So we hope that you'll join us for a panel of both citizen activists and lawmakers who are really working towards protecting that wall of separations. And now I'm going to tell you a number of the names that I'm really excited about to have here. So you'll forgive me if I check my phone to make sure that I don't miss somebody. So we're going to have, like, our main speaker will be Rachel Lazar, who's from Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, which is one of the main organizations that's really working to protect Americans from Christian nationalism. In addition, we'll have two members of the legislature's Secular Government Caucus. We'll have the co-chair of that, Mike Freiberg, in addition to Esther Agbaje, who's another member of the Secular Government Caucus. In addition to them, we'll have Jess Braverman, who's the legal director of Gender Justice, Reverend Angela Denker, who is a Lutheran minister, book author, and contributing columnist at the Minnesota Star-Tribune, Gina Schneider, who's the campaign and advocacy manager for Compassion and Choices, MN, and Christian Schutt, who's the head of the School Board Integrity Project. And I keep saying in addition, but I am going to say in addition to this, we're going to actually be having an event the night before on the 17th, which we're calling the Religious Freedom Dinner on Friday evening. And at that, we're going to have special guests, Rachel Lazar, and other special guests. And that's going to be at the Humanities Center in St. Paul. Additional details on that are coming in early December. And if you do have questions on that, feel free, obviously, to ask one of the board members. Otherwise, visit humanistmn.org for more details. We really hope to see everybody there. Thank you. And back to Audrey.
Thanks, Paul. So just a reminder for everybody, this is November. Not that we need a remindering. It's a bad month anyway. But December is coming up, and time for a respite, time to put the year to bed. And we will not be having a regular community gathering here in December. But instead, we will be hosting a New Year's Eve party on December 29th at a food hall called Eat Street Crossing in South Minneapolis, way down at the end of Nicollet, which is known as Eat Street here in this town. So save that date, December 29th. We hope that you'll come out and help us close out this rough year that we've had, and together we'll join in happy times to fortify ourselves for the year to come. There's going to be a meetup post out about that, and it'll be listed on our webpage just in the next few days. We're not quite ready with that yet. And if you're able to come, I hope you'll sign up early and get your tickets, because that will help us really with the planning process. When food and beverage is involved, there's planning, so we appreciate that. The other event that's coming up is, of course, the one that Paul just brought to our attention, that very special night in January, or the night before, and then Saturday, we'll be back right here in this room to focus our attention on the work that lays ahead of us for the coming year. You know, it's at times like these that we need to remember that there are good people all across this country. even in South Florida, where our speaker today, Tane Danger, hails from. However, Tane has been in Minnesota for many years now, having come here to attend Gustavus Adolphus College, which was founded by Swedish Lutherans in St. Peter in 1862. Without being born here, Tane, how much more Minnesotan can you get? And after college, Tane stayed here. He went on to earn a Master of Public Policy at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs, amidst his ongoing passion and pursuit since his youth of being an improv performer. Hence, he went on to combine those two passions, civic-mindedness and improv, to co-found the Theater of Public Policy and Danger Boat Productions. Creatively, Tane and his colleagues engage people in public policy issues, promote dialogue, and build community through comedic performance and improv workshops. Along with these ongoing endeavors, Tane is currently an artist in residence and improv teacher at the Mayo Clinic. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Tane Danger.
I'm loud. I didn't turn anything off. Hi, everybody. No, now I'm really on. I'm so excited to be here. My name, again, Tane Danger. I host a lot of shows, and the way that I usually will start a theater or public policy show is sort of like this, but I'll do it for me personally. So please applaud if you have never heard of me before. Good. The most applause that I will get today. It was a wonderful introduction. So I have this odd background and work that I do using the things that I really care about, which are public policy, bringing people together, and doing that through this art that I've been practicing and loving since I was in high school of unscripted improv theater. And I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how I came to do those different things. But I will just say on the front end, like I'm in a mode right now. There's a lot in the opening about, we're in this very dire, difficult moment and things are really hard. And there's ways that I think that are true. And there's also ways where I'm like, the things that I get really passionate and concerned about are long-standing things, because it's about how we are so often drifting apart from each other, how we are segmenting ourselves, how we have communities that don't talk to each other and don't understand each other, and don't therefore understand what kinds of policies or what kinds of politics are being practiced. And so I really am feeling so motivated and passionate right now about how do we create the spaces and how do we train ourselves to have these kinds of dialogues and conversations and coming together where we listen and we learn and we talk to people who see the world differently than we do. And so I'm going to talk about that, but either don't worry or worry, it will be through improv comedy. So one way either that'll make people very happy or very nervous. But I really do believe, and I'm going to get to this, like that improv trains you to do a lot of things really well. But one of the most important is that it helps you listen and connect with people on a totally different level. And again, that's what I'm really passionate about the most, more than anything. And it's, to me, like what we desperately, desperately need right now in so many different ways. So let me backtrack though. Let me start. We got a little bit of my overview, who I am. Like, why do I get to stand up on this? It's not. I always want to say a stage, which I feel like sometimes churches don't love. But this isn't. This is a Unitarian space. I don't know if they a dais, whatever it is. It's wonderful. I get to be up here. But why? Who am I? What do I do? So as was mentioned, I grew up in South Florida. Came up here to go to college at Gustavus, and at Gustavus, I had been exposed to improv, unscripted theater in high school, and had loved it there, watched a local theater. But when I got to Gustavus, there were folks who actually were on the faculty who had like practiced improv, had written books about it, but there was no improv troupe there. There was nobody practicing any of this. And so I was like, well, this should exist, this should be. And so I got together, and unfortunately, the faculty weren't particularly interested in, at that time, making that happen. So we just got a bunch of students together and we started practicing. And we started an improv troupe there at Gustavus that one of my proudest things is that troupe still exists. Like, it's still operating and does very popular, successful shows on campus, lo these many years later, that are great and are wonderful. But that's where I really started to fall in love with doing improv, performing, and then also starting to see like why it's something that teaches us so many different skills and habits that I think are valuable off stage as much as they are on stage. So let me do this. Again, I'm like a theater and comedy person. I like can't not like ask audiences questions and get feedback. Show how many folks have ever like gone and seen improv before, or like have watched? Okay, like a lot of people. So I'll just talk to you. So improv, no, that's totally, because people have probably seen different kinds of improv, different places, all these different things. But the way that I like to describe improv in short is it is two people or more usually getting up on stage and doing a performance, doing a show with no pre-planning, no pre-written script, no lines of dialogue or cues or anything like that planned out ahead of time. And so they are coming up on stage together and they are creating the entire thing that you're going to see in the moment, in real time, just based off of what is happening in their two heads or more and how they discover and build something together. And that's my eloquent, like if I'm writing an academic paper, like explanation of improv. The other version of describing improv that I've actually heard someone use without realizing it is, it's sort of like if you walked in late to an improv show, you would think this play was poorly rehearsed. This is a totally true story. Jill Bernard, who's an inspiration and an improviser in town, she literally had a show once, and I love this story she tells, where they were in the middle of an improv show. Somebody walked in like 10 minutes late, so they missed the beginning of the improv show where somebody was like, this is all made up, we're all doing this on the spot. And so they just walked in once they were already doing all the improv, and they were doing the comedy bits, and they were being all these different characters and things. And then they broke for intermission, and as they're walking off, Jill hears this person say, I don't think they practiced. Which is just great. So improv is this wonderful, magical thing, because when you're watching it, you're getting to see both like a beautiful, amazing, usually funny, hilarious performance, comedy sketches, but you're also getting to see the act of creation, the act of that being made in real time. And just thinking, that might sound like, oh yeah, that's interesting, but like where else like is that possible, right? Like where else do we don't usually get to like sit and see like a writer write their story, or we don't usually watch someone like paint like they're painting. We usually see the finished product. But this is one thing, this and other forms of improvisation like jazz music and a few other things, but are these very kind of special things to me, because you are both getting the final product, you're getting this thing, but you're getting to be there in the space with the person and seeing how they are devising and coming up with and creating this thing. And it does, for the folks, I'm guessing, who have seen this, create this sense of just sort of like you're a little bit on the edge of your seat, right? Like you're a little bit like, oh, how is this going to work? Like, how are they going to figure this out? We've, again, folks who've seen a bunch of improv, you've almost certainly had an experience where you're like, oh, they really like walked themselves into a corner with this one. Like, how are they going to find their way out of this? And there's a way, and I know for a fact that can make some people really uncomfortable, but like that discomfort is because we feel like pulled into that. We feel pulled into what is being created on stage and what those people are devising and coming up with together in that moment. And I think that that is a really key piece, because there's a key aspect to improv, and you could make this argument about a lot of art, but again, because this is something where when we're up on stage and we're creating and we're doing, we're necessarily vulnerable in a way that, again, I don't want to say like a writer isn't vulnerable. It is a very brave thing to write something and put it out into the world. It is very brave to paint something, to compose a piece of music to X, Y, and Z. And yet, like, I can go in, I have something I'm working on writing right now, and it has been sitting on my computer with me coming back to it many, many times over the course of the last week, as I've been trying to get it just the way that I want it before it goes out into the world. And in improv, we don't get that. We have to just sort of be up here and sharing this and giving ourselves in a different kind of way in that moment. And so that demands then, when we're doing this, that we are building and practicing a bunch of skills and a bunch of habits in us to be able to do that. Because there's just like the hard part of improv, which is like, I don't know what I'm going to say. Like, I don't know what I'm going to say, and I definitely don't know what my scene partner is going to say up on stage. And so there's just the like uncomfortability or like oddness of like, we're going to figure this out together, and I don't know, and I have to be able to adapt and react to what that is, right? Like, my scene partner might say something completely unexpected that I had no idea, and I have to just hear that and go with it and move with that thing. So that part's hard. There's the part that's always a little bit hard and uncomfortable about being in front of an audience, which is, yeah, everybody's like looking at you and there's attention and focus on you, and you have to be comfortable with that. And then, as I said, like this third piece of just this holding this vulnerability of like, I don't know what is going to happen, but we are going to figure this out together. We are going to do this together, and by we, I mean me up on stage, my scene partner, the other folks who are creating, and then you all as an audience, and we're going to go on this journey together. And there is a level of openness and humanity like that really goes with us being able to do that. And you have to practice a lot of things in order to make this happen. So, as was mentioned, I was doing improv as just like a fun thing. I started doing improv in college, as I said, graduated from Gustavus, moved here to Minneapolis. I actually just lived not very far. Like, I could probably throw a rock at my old apartment from here. It was very close to this. And I was working for the state of Minnesota for a period of time, for the state's sesquicentennial, the state's 150th anniversary, and got a big exposure to, legislative politics, different legislators, different things going on, not just though in St. Paul, and this is one of the things that's really going to inform like stuff that I care about to this day, all over Minnesota, because the state sesquicentennial was about going out all over Minnesota, being in different communities, and having them as part of the state's like recognition and honoring of like 150 years of statehood in all different ways and places across the state. So I was doing that. I went from there to doing work at a couple of different nonprofits, one that was like a small local nonprofit working, again, mostly here in the state of Minnesota. Another one I worked for a period of time was a big international nonprofit that did very good work around the world. Anyway, I could go on about those, but the thing that I was starting to notice in each of these spaces, in state government and nonprofits and politics and things, is that there were like a lot of people doing really good, meaningful work, like things that I feel like this room in particular would care about in terms of trying to make the world a better place, trying to get people to a better situation than they had been, trying to support and serve people, trying to pass laws or do things in a legislative process that made the state or communities or something better. And they were so often terrible about talking about what they were doing, right? Like, they were so, especially I found like I was about to say especially my nonprofit friends, but especially my legislative friends. But all of them, so often, it would be like, hey everybody, everything is terrible. Would you like to talk more about that? And then they would be surprised that there would be people who'd be like, I've got something scheduled, so I'm good. I actually, one of the revelatory moments for me was I was invited to speak, and at this point, I was still like young enough to be invited to speak as like a young person interested in policy and public affairs things. And it was, the event was scheduled for 8 a.m. at a library. And it was like sort of this panel conversation, one of these things where like, you know, 3 people just keep handing a microphone back and forth between each other and saying these things. And I distinctly remember, I mean, I was at least as impetuous or more than I am now, just saying at some point, like, who is this for? Like, who did we design this sort of meeting and gathering for at 8 a.m. on a Saturday at the library? Because to be fair, there were people there. There were absolutely people there. But they were the people who go to a civic event at 8 a.m. at a library on a Saturday. Like, we know who those people are. Like, we're probably a lot of those people. I go to those things. Great. Like, that's wonderful. But my whole brain is thinking this whole time, like, if you're doing this good work and you are doing things to try and make people, make the world a better place somehow, like, shouldn't we be trying to think about, like, how do you make this interesting and compelling and something people beyond the usual suspects want to be a part of? How do we think about building these spaces in ways that it's not, and this is something I really get worked up about, it's not, okay, we should care about this because it's like just sort of like our obligation or our right thing to do, but I want to care about this because it seems like something that there's energy and excitement and fun even around, right? And sometimes I've had my friends in sort of civic spaces sometimes push back when I say this, and they'll be like, well, I mean, people should care about this issue because it matters. And I'll be like, you know, that should thing, how's that working out for you? Right? Like, I mean, there definitely are people who will show up and who will care because they should, because it's like the right thing to do. But I don't know. Maybe it's because I've gotten trained as somebody who now runs a theater company that, you know, I want people to come. I want people to show up. I want them to be in the seats, and I want them to be moved and have an experience and be taken on a journey together. And I can't tell people you should come to my shows, so do it. Like, I actually have to do something that people want to be a part of and want to be engaged with. And so I have to think about it on that axis. So this is a long wind-up to say, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about all the public policy and nonprofit work I was doing. At the same time, I was still doing improv stuff. And I was like, well, improvisers are pretty good storytellers. They can take really complex information and they can bring it to life in different kinds of ways, and they can do something that makes an audience maybe see something from a different perspective or a different angle. Maybe there's some way to do these things together. So I met with some of my friends, particularly the guy who would end up being my co-founder, Brandon Boat, who I'd been doing improv with since Gustavus. And we started talking about how we could build a show. And basically what we came up with was a show where we would talk to, usually I would interview somebody on stage about a big policy issue, something in science, something in culture, something in civic life somehow, somebody who is really smart about that, or a couple of people who maybe had different points of view on that kind of thing, and we would have a conversation with them. But then what made it different than, you know, the Saturday morning like conversation thing that I had been a part of, is that then we had this team of really talented improv comedy performers who would have listened to that entire conversation, and then they immediately take over the stage and they do unscripted comedy theater based on exactly whatever they just heard in that moment. And this was what we ended up calling the Theater of Public Policy, the show that we started. And then we would usually bring the guests back up on stage, we would open it up for the audience to ask them questions, and then we would do one last round of improv, because we really wanted the performers, the artists, the improvisers, to have the final word on this thing. Now, I should say, when we were playing with this idea, when we were coming up with this, I spent some time before we ever did the first show talking to my friends in civic and policy world about it, and I spent time talking to my improv and comedy friends. And almost to a person, my improv and comedy friends, when I would kind of pitch them this idea, would say, well, like, we're going to do a show about like public policy? That doesn't sound very fun. Why would you do that? Conversely, my friends in the civic policy world, when I would pitch them this, and this is a direct quote I will remember for the rest of my life. Like, I remember, but there were versions of this with multiple people, but I pitched this idea and I had people who would say, well, if people are having such a good time, are they really learning anything? I'm like, oh my God, this is the problem. Because, just to say, and right, I'm gonna very quickly like put on my Mayo Clinic artist in residency hat. There's very good research that suggests, not just suggests, but would lead one to conclude that people actually learn better when they are enjoying themselves, that they retain more information, they have they remember more of what they are presented, and they are more likely to retain it afterwards. And so yes, it is important that they actually have a good time when they do that. And very importantly, going back to a big part of the impetus for this whole thing, the notion was you would get people who wouldn't probably otherwise come to something like this to come to this. So we put up this show at huge improv theater, rest in peace, in the fall of 2011 for the first time. And to be totally fair, I really didn't know. I was like, this will be fun for me, I think. But I didn't know if anybody else would like it or anybody else would come to it. But we started doing it, and people did. People started coming, and they started having a really good time with it. And what was so interesting, I did that, I really do that little experiment thing that I did at the beginning of this talk, where I asked people to applaud. If they, in that case, I always ask, applaud if you've never come to one of our shows before. And what I do that because it's fun, but also because it started to reveal, like, oh, new people were coming to every show that we did, and they were coming because they were interested in a particular topic or they wanted to see a different thing. And you started to notice as we were talking to people in the audiences that you were building really interesting audiences. You were building people who would show up to it. We would do a show on, you know, like, how should we like redesign like this highway or something like that, and get some civil engineers from MnDOT or somewhere. And there would be people who would come to that show because they care about that or they live somewhere nearby. There would be people who come to that because they are themselves transportation engineers, and they would say to me, like, I've been working on highways for 30 years. I've never seen a comedy show about one. So I just had to see how this would work. And then you would get people who would just kind of come. Oh, I always think of these people as the people who come because they're like, well, I got to kind of see, I got to see this insanity that they're trying to do. They're going to do like a comedy show about highways? Like, how can that work? And so it'd just be sort of like a Marvel thing here. But that to me was like a huge success of what we were doing, that you were getting these different kinds of audiences together, and particularly that all of those different kinds of audiences would all find value in what we were doing. And we could, you know, I decided not to do slides, but I could show you a slide of like survey results and great anecdotal feedback and the fact that audiences grew over time. But take my word, I guess I would say for it, that like these different audiences would say like, oh, that was so interesting. I had never thought about X issue really before. And like this made me think about it in a different way. Or you would have the people who had been working on it for years and would say, I have been working on this for years, and I never kind of thought about it from this angle or that thing that you brought up before. One of the really fascinating things about the way that the show developed is that, you know, we would have these very important guests, people like who were making decisions about major policy things in our state or even in some cases in the country. And they would say what they say, and a lot of them talk about this all the time, and so they kind of would say their piece, and then they would go and sit in the audience, and then they would watch the improv part. And they would, and I literally can remember several of them saying almost verbatim, oh, I've been giving this talk for years, like about healthcare policy, and I never realized that thing that your improvisers picked up on, like that one little sentence I said about like the cost piece of it or whatnot, was the thing that was gonna like stick, right? Like that was the piece that like people actually picked up on, but your cast did like 5 minutes of comedy about that one part of it, which is making me realize like, oh, there's something to this that I probably should think about more in my presentations, like, and that is actually something people are really like connecting to and resonating with, because your cast picked up on it and then the audience is laughing at that. So we started doing that. At some point, Minneapolis Institute of Arts is like, oh, this is great. Some of them come to one of the shows and like, this is great. If you can, and this is a direct quote again, if you could get an entire audience to sit for an hour and a half for a presentation and show about water quality in southern Minnesota, can you do that for Rembrandt? And so they hired me and Brandon to be artists in residence at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts for 6 months and try and do some of these different programs around using improv as different ways to like get people interested in some of the things there. That's a whole side story. I'll come do another talk about how arts institutions are oftentimes actually really difficult places to be creative. We'll talk about that some other time. I love Mia. They're great. If you want me back, I'll come back. It was a fun, weird 6 months. So that's a part where we're like starting to, we are like, okay, this is a real thing now. People are hiring us to bring this show to college campuses, to conferences, to all these different things. So I guess we better actually start and create an entity, like, because at that point it had just been sort of like a show we were doing. So we created Danger Boat Productions. I'm Tane Danger. My co-founder is Brandon Boat. Works out that way. And the work from there, like we kept doing theater of public policy, but we started growing into like teaching more, right? Like teaching people some of these improv skills. Because as I was saying, like the things that improvisers are doing on stage are helping not just sort of like you create this show, but helping you think and be creative and adaptive in all these different kinds of ways that we're like, these are going to be really valuable skills for folks in policy spaces, in civic spaces, which is a lot of where we were working. But honestly, the longer that, well, and now, as was mentioned in my introduction, like I'm doing a lot of this work as the first artist in residence at the Mayo Clinic Center for Humanities and Medicine in Rochester. And so they are recognizing like how some of these improv skills are really useful off stage. But the long and the short of it is like, I honestly believe like the things that improvisers practice that allow them to do what they do up on stage are just good human skills. Like, they are just the things that help us be better humans, better people able to connect with one another, better able to listen to each other, better able to co-create, co-discover, co-build something in a space where we don't know what is going to happen, which is technically every space. And so we started teaching these different classes and workshops, and have really grown the work in a variety of different ways. And so what I wanted to do with some of my time today was actually talk about, as I said at the top, some of the stuff that we've gotten really passionate about, particularly like this, kind of over the last couple of years. Again, I think that, and you could look at trends of like, we have become a lot more divided, a lot more isolated in a lot of different ways in our society. Like, there's a lot of different ways where we are less connected with people who are different than us in X, Y, and Z different ways. We end up in bubbles where a lot of the people think and say a lot of the same kinds of things that we think and say. We geographically are sorting ourselves so that we end up physically in community with people who are very similar and think in a lot of the same ways that we do. And then you start to see how that has social consequences, that has political consequences, that has sort of just civic, like human-to-human consequences of making a lot of things that we kind of take for granted really hard. Like, it makes it really hard to not just sort of like, not just sort of, know that somebody is going to do something, but you don't even understand the context that would push somebody or incentivize somebody to make the decisions that they would make, because it feels so alien and so different. And so we have been really leaning into this in a few different ways. We started a project actually last year, but we really got it off the ground this year, called Sketches of Minnesota. And I love Sketches of Minnesota. It's something that's been in my brain since I was at the Humphrey School. I actually wrote about it as a concept then. But Sketches of Minnesota is a new project that Danger Boat launched this year with the Minnesota Humanities Center, where I know you all are doing your event in January. And basically the premise is that we take our improv troupe to different communities around Minnesota, all over. We did 10 communities this year. And in each one, we have a gathering like this, except we would probably have like everybody sitting around tables, and there would be a free meal, and everybody's invited, and we really try and spend time at the beginning trying to get all different parts of the community to show up across ideological lines, across political lines, across class, race, socioeconomic, like whatever you like trying to really build constituencies that are people from all different parts of whatever town or community that we're in to be there together, to share a meal together, and then we ask them to have conversations at their tables. And we set some ground rules, we set some ground agreements for having these conversations. But our goal with that, with these conversations, is to get them to talk about what really matters to them. And we don't ask like, oh, who are you going to vote for this year or something like that, but we ask them, what is great about your community? Like, what are you really proud of that you tell other people about your community? We ask them, what is something that somebody who's not from your community like probably gets wrong about it a lot? Or what is an assumption or a stereotype about this place that people make that you think is not true? What are challenges or divisions in your community that worry you, that concern you? What are things that you see people dividing about that make you anxious? And then what do you see as the future of this place? Like, what do you imagine is the future of this place? And we have a process where we have asked people to sort of take turns talking about this. be respectful and think about how they are talking to each other with this. But our cast is going around and listening to all these different conversations at these different tables. And then they get up on stage and they do a show, they do a performance that's like, here's what we heard you all say about your community and your town. Like, here's the things that we feel like we heard you say were important to you about your town, things that people get wrong about this place, the divisions or challenges in your town that worry you, and what you kind of imagine the future of this place. And they do like a half-hour show based on this. And it's usually like there's some really funny stuff, but I'll tell you what, and we had to practice how to get to this, but we get to some really hard stuff sometimes with some of these communities. But to a performance, we're doing these everywhere. Like this, and I'm not gonna remember all 10 off the top of my head, but this year we went to Winona, West St. Paul, Glencoe, Morris, Little Falls, Duluth, Austin, International Falls, and 2 other really amazing communities that are so great, I don't wanna out them. And in every single place, this process got people to have real conversations with each other. And real conversations that even for me as somebody who cares about that and does this work like all over, I was taken aback like several times by how honest and transparent people would be about things that they, frankly, a lot of times the things that they worried about, like in their communities, like the real anxieties that they had, whether, you know, economic or the fact that their town is, you know, changing in ways that they don't understand, or that they can't imagine what the future of the place is really, like, and they don't know how to answer that question sometimes. But also, and this is the part that was like the most, you know, heart-filling for me, every single community that we went to, people wanted to brag about their community. Everywhere we went, people like had amazing, wonderful things to say about where they were from and why it was the best place. And you know, and I don't want to like put it like, but I can imagine, I list off some of those places, and there's probably at least one of those. Almost all of us are like, really? Like you would? They will tell you why you are 100, well, they may or may not. They would definitely tell you, yes, this is an amazing, awesome place to live. And the only reason I hesitate to say, and they would tell you you're wrong, is because in some of them, they're like, and we kind of have a good secret here, and we don't necessarily want everybody to know how amazing and great it is here, because we're really happy, like, it being our kind of secret, like, amazing, wonderful thing here. So that is wonderful and amazing. And so, so we do those conversations, and those are so powerful. And then we do a show, and we reflect this back to everybody. And again, they get to see this, and they get to see like this performance that's reflecting back the things that they say. And again, there's something, we could talk longer about this, but there's something really cathartic about, you get to laugh about some of these things. You get to see your story brought to life on stage, and I think that there's something really powerful about that. But there was one, one other piece of all of this that I should say is that we do a talk back then afterwards, right? Like we open it up for the audience to like do a talk back after we do this, so that they can say like, oh yeah, that was really funny. Like you nailed these things about this or whatever. That's amazing. Or in theory, they can say, and sometimes they do. Oh, you didn't like get this, or you said this and it wasn't funny. It was funny, the last one of these that we did was in International Falls, and they had a great time. It was really positive, but there was, during the talkback, somebody was like, you didn't bring up Smokey the Bear. And I was like, well, nobody mentioned Smokey the Bear. Well, you should have. Sorry, I didn't know, like, I apologize. But you know, that's your biggest critique. So the story though, that there was a particular woman who, we did a show in, this was in Little Falls, And I happened to end up sitting at the table, and there was a woman at this table, and I would say this, like, if she were here too, like, the whole time we were doing this, I was a little bit apprehensive, because she was somebody who, like, everything that we brought up, you would be like, somebody would be like, oh, well, it's really cool, like, a couple new stores moved in downtown, and she'd be like, yeah, well, it's about time, since there's so much, like, vacant property there. Or, somebody would say, like, oh, I noticed, like, the local church, like, had an event where they got everybody together, like, yeah, well, I mean, that's good, since, that church split in half, and half the people don't even go there anymore. Like, she was just kind of like, a lot of things really kind of grinded her gears about things that were going on in the town or whatever. And I think I actually did kind of jokingly at some point say to her, like, give me one thing that you really just are really happy about, right? Like, and I think she did. But the reason that I remember her so distinctly is because we did the show, and the show raised up some of these issues about ups and downs of your small town downtown, things about community, things about different divisions in the town, things about housing affordability, things about, like, hunger in the community, a whole batch of, like, real issues in some difficult spaces. And during the talk back, she raised her hand. And I'm going around with the microphone, I'm like, okay, here we go. And I went up to her, and she had to, like, take a moment, because she was getting emotional, like, even before she could say anything. And eventually she said, I've lived in this community for more than a decade, and I thought I was the only person who cared about some of these things that I care about. And in being here tonight, and, like, in some of the conversation, but then in seeing, like, this show, and then knowing that show was reflecting things in the audience people had said, I'm now realizing I am not alone in caring about those things. And then she had a fun line where she said, I believe that this show puts the kibosh on loneliness, which I thought was very sweet. But I share that anecdote not to, like, brag about what we do, but to say, when I said at the top of this, like, talk, like, why I'm so animated and so motivated about, like, us going out right now in this moment and, like, talking and listening to people, is because of people like that woman who, if like, I had just sat next to her on a bus or something, it would have been very easy to be like, oh, she's just, like, I don't necessarily understand, like, what we have in common. Like, I'm not seeing necessarily, like, where we might have some point of agreement. Like, I still, to this day, I don't know what her politics are. I don't know, like, what her, a lot of probably, like, some of the other issues and things that she cares about. But what I do know is that she really does care about her community. And she really does want to make her community and the people around her better. And she felt isolated and alone because she felt like nobody else was trying to connect with her on any of that previously. And again, we could do some project about, like, well, who's not talking to who, or who's not reaching out, or whatever. I don't really care. What I care about is that we all have, like, the ability and power in us to do better with that. We can all go out and make connections, listen and talk to people from different points of view, people actually who we know or we really think see things differently than us. And we can try, at least, to hear and understand, like, where they come from and what animates or motivates them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to agree on, we almost, in a lot of cases, we might not agree on, like, what the solutions are. We may not always agree on what the problems are, but I fundamentally believe if you can get to a place where you can see and understand what someone truly values, what is important to them, that there, in my experience, there's almost always something there that you can build a connection with, that you can find some sort of connection with another person on what is important to them and is important to you on a values level. And it may take work and it may be really hard, and there's all kinds of things in the world that make it more challenging and harder, but in my last couple of minutes here, I'm gonna just give you a couple of improv tips, improv secrets for how to do this. Because again, I really believe that improv is something that has helped me, and now we are doing trainings and projects to teach some people these skills. We actually have a project right now with the Humphrey School of Public Affairs where we designed a half-day training to lead people through exercises and trainings to help them build a connection with somebody who sees things differently than they do, to have a conversation with somebody who is viewing things very differently than you do, listening to them, asking them good questions, but also finding a way that you can share what is important and of value to you in a way that hopefully they are then open to as well. So, very first thing, this is very core to what improv is all about, and I think is the most important thing that I will say in terms of how you do this work, of how you go out and build connections with people who are different than you, is that you have to go at it in what we kind of talk about as a curious or explorer mindset. You have to go into conversations with other people wanting, your first instinct has to be, I want to understand, right? I want to know more. I'm curious about this. And this is what we have to do in improv all the time, right? I can't come into an improv scene. Well, I can come into an improv scene and have in my head, I know what the right thing to happen in this scene is, and I'm going to make it do this. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be bad though. It's going to break the scene because it's not giving my scene partner anything to work with. It's not actually us building anything together. It's just me corralling this and trying to force it to go where I want it to go. And so we have to practice hyper curiosity with what is going on stage at all times. My scene partner comes out and says, oh, the boss is coming over tonight and I burned his birthday cake. I have to be, I didn't know any of that was coming, and I have to be super curious about okay, what, in this scene, who do you work for? Why are we making the boss a birthday cake at our house? There's all these different things, but I have to be curious. So coming back to these tips, being really curious about what somebody else is thinking and why they are thinking it is the place to start. I see this mistake over and over again, and I think that it is frankly a mistake sometimes other projects and trainings that are trying to help people have dialogue across difference don't address straight on, is that we go into it thinking oh, I'm going to have this conversation with this other person because I'm going to get them to just agree with me by the end of it, right? By the end of this, they'll see how right I am about all of this, and I'm just going to tell you, it's just not going to. It doesn't work because you then are not actually open to hearing this other person, which means that they then are going to be defensive as well. And people aren't dumb. People know whether you're actually listening and interested and curious in who they are and what they're about. So number one, please try and go into things with the notion of I'm interested and I want to understand where you are to start. You can get to a place where you're I hear that, and I want to share why I see things differently or whatnot. But if you don't start from that place of I can listen and I can hear you, then it's really difficult to go anywhere from there. Actually, showing that you are listening to someone is wildly valuable. That was that story from Little Falls, where that woman really felt like nobody had actually sort of listened to her. And so how do you demonstrate that you're listening? Well, there's simple things. Don't be like on your phone while you're talking to someone else. Don't be like distracted. My husband has this thing where like he'll ask me like, this was literally something that just happened. He'll be like, oh, you know, how was your day? And I'll be like, oh, it was good. I was doing this, that, or the other. And like halfway through like how was my day? He'll be like, oh, did you get this other thing? And I'm like, you weren't listening to like what I was saying at all. You were focused on like this other thing going on in your brain. And so there's like a little trick, and trick is a bad word because it's actually like you both actually listening and showing that you're listening, but it's called looping. And so basically what the practice of looping is that somebody says something to you, they say, community is like really important to me because like, it's like how I find the most happiness in my life is like with the other people around me. Looping would be if I hear that, me reflecting back to the other person, like what I think I heard them say. I'm hearing you say like community is really important to you because like that's where your friends are and like that's what you did. And then that other person can say, yes, you got that right. That is what's most important to me. Or they can say, well, I mean, when I said that it's the most important thing, I actually meant like it's one of a few things that's important to me. And they can kind of like correct that. But if you take that little step of just sort of like listening enough so that you can reflect back to someone else what you heard them say, again, it's a really nice little tool to use because it gets you centered and I'm actually paying attention to this other person and it's demonstrating to them, I heard you and I am reflecting back that I heard you. And then the third and final thing that I just would encourage you again, and this is a little bit of a repeat, but it's so important like with what we do. And again, it might sound odd that this comes out of improv, but it really, there is a connection. The last tip I would share with you all, listen for what someone values. Try and listen for that underneath maybe whatever else they're saying. In this training that we built for the Humphrey School, we do this exercise where we have two people turn to each other and it's like, you just rant or kvetch or whatever you want to call it, like at the other person for 90 seconds about anything you want to do, about traffic, about people who don't rake their leaves, about politicians who drive you nuts, but just like anything that you can like, be really animated and upset about for like 90 seconds and just go off at that other person about this. And then what the other person's job after you do that 90 seconds of like really venting about this thing is your job would be to repeat back to the other person, not what they ranted to you about or what they were upset about. What are the values that you expressed in that 90-second rant? So if I ranted for 90 seconds about people who don't rake their leaves and they just leave them all out, I'm making this up, but you know, the other person might say, well, Tane really cares about people taking care of the space around them. He has a care about nature and about the environment because he's worried about what might happen to water systems potentially if we aren't paying attention to certain things. He cares about sort of like us all taking a step to like chip in and be part of a community and like somehow take our own step towards like trying to help in some way in that way. And I promise you, like it sounds so strange in some ways, but if you actually try this, you'll find, oh, there's actually stuff here underneath what anybody else is saying that, again, doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with all of it. It doesn't mean necessarily that I would prioritize it as the most important thing, but it gives me a window into understanding where somebody else is, and that can be like the opening steps to like, we could potentially have something in common here, something that we can actually build from together. And also, this invites the other person to like listen and reflect back with you. So, I would say, kind of like, I think that I'm probably about at time. So, well, I have 2 minutes, so I will do one last little thing because this is probably like, this is like the improv lesson where if I don't teach it, then I like lose my improv license. So, which is like the two magic words in improv that we practice we literally use on stage, and is like a lot of the things I was saying, like a philosophy of like how we think about the world, are these two words, yes and. Has anybody ever heard yes and before? I'm seeing some nodding. So the idea of yes and is my scene partner, again, comes up on stage and says, oh, I burned the birthday cake for the boss. I say yes, and we're gonna figure this out. I've got stuff to make a pie, whatever it is. And I say yes, I hear like this thing that you've brought into the scene, and I am going to build something on it. The reason it's so important is because if you do the opposite, if my scene partner comes in and says, oh, I burned the birthday cake for the boss, and I say, what do you mean? There's no cake here. I don't know who you are. What do you mean you're boss? You're unemployed. That like gets a laugh in that moment, but like what do we do from there? Right? Like where do we go? Like what's the how does that scene keep going from there? It just, we've like undermined everything about it. And so yes and is honestly a tool that you can use in having conversations with people. In hearing somebody say, I am really worried and upset about the fact that there are no affordable places for young families to move to in my small community. Yes, that is like a serious issue, and there's all kinds of different ways you can take the and from there. And I have seen that too, or, and I know that there's people trying to work on that in this way, or, and you know, that's one of the things that I think is making it hard for this community to grow or whatnot. At this point, and I imagine I'm going to preempt because I know we're opening it up for questions. Somebody's always like, how can I say yes and to somebody who like says something that I fundamentally like disagree with or I think is terrible or awful? And I totally hear that. First of all, yes and isn't always the right response, right? Like it is absolutely, there are times when yes and is not correct. Again, I work at Mayo Clinic. There are times when if you say to your doctor like, oh, I just really want to smoke a whole lot more for the rest of my life, your doctor is probably not going to be like, yes, and like, do you like the Marlboros or the Luckies? Like, right? But I think that we live in a world where so often we're like stuck in like a no. Like this, I have nothing in common with these people. No, I have no way to connect with you. Or no, like this thing that I'm imagining isn't possible for all these different reasons. Like we operate in a no place, or here in the Midwest, in Minnesota, we operate in a yes but mindset, which is Minnesota for no. Yes, that is such a good idea that you had, but let's not do it. So I always encourage people, try and think about like how can I say yes and to other people? And there are even ways to say yes and, like in that is an actual example I use like with my students at Mayo. Somebody saying like, oh, I really love smoking. I want to do more of it. Like you can actually imagine a doctor saying, yes, I hear you saying you want to smoke more, and it is my job as your doctor to tell you that that is not probably going to be good for you in the long run. Like that is going to have negative consequences. And maybe we should like talk about, is there some way that like we could go somewhere else with this? But the yes and is so powerful and so much more powerful than just yes, because it is, as I said with the other example, reflecting to someone, I heard you, I heard what you said, and I am working with what you said enough to contribute or add something to it. Yes is easy. You know, my husband says like, oh, did you pick up stuff for dinner? I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, and I like, who knows if I even did or not? But like, but if I say like, yes, I did, and like, oh, we're gonna cook this thing together or whatnot. Like now we're actually like potentially in some sort of a conversation with each other. And so we've covered a lot. But just the teacher in me really wants to just like emphasize these things, because like I really hope like these are things that you all take home from you. go in with like an explore creativity mindset with everything that you do. Like, I promise you, this will make your world much more interesting and exciting. You will find things in other people that will delight you, maybe sometimes horrify you, but a lot of times delight you, and be something that opens you up in all kinds of different ways. Really demonstrate and try and show that you are listening to somebody else, like, because it matters both for you and actually internalizing and getting that, and for the other person and feeling safe and willing to like share what they want to share. Listen for values whenever you can. And it gets hard. We live in a world where like there's all kinds of things to incentivize us to hear just like the attacks or the negative things or the talking points, but really try and listen to like what matters to someone and where does that come from. And if you don't know, ask. Like, ask somebody what is most important to hear about this thing. And then finally, try taking yes and out for a spin. Right? Like, go through a day and just kind of see to yourself, how often can I say to somebody else, yes and, when I'm in conversations with them? And try and pay attention to, does that change, not just sort of like the outcome of that conversation, but how this other person and I feel, and how we feel connected to each other, and where we might go together in the future. So, take an improv class. Everybody should take an improv class. So that's more than my time, I think. So I'm going to stop there and say thank you very much. And I think now we open it up for questions. Yay!
Is this on?
Yeah.
Is this on?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. All right. I couldn't hear both. Yes, thank you so much, Tane. That was wonderful. So if anyone wants to ask a question, I think we have about maybe 15 minutes for questions. Come over here, line up here.
Oh, wow.
And try to do. Keep it as a question.
Yes, please.
Keep it as a question.
Oh, my God.
So we can hear more from Tane. The rest of us want to make commentary. We can do that later during the time.
This is such a good, because I host a lot of things, and like the most terrifying words to somebody who moderates conversations is, I have more of a comment than a question.
Yes. So questions, please.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I never saw you at your show at Bryant Lake, but I'm glad to see you now. I love I hear you and when door knocking. Mm-hmm. Really essential. My question, I was reading about a book about somebody who was discussing navigating groups that don't have a hierarchy. How do you resolve, because there's always differences of opinion and priority or whatever it might be. She said, sometimes we need to rethink it as it's a good versus good, just different goals.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on navigating that? Do you have any thought about that concept that might help resolve some tension?
Yeah, so the question, if I'm reading it right, is kind of about like navigating some of these tensions, particularly when there's maybe not hierarchy or it's a more flat thing, which is super interesting. Improv generally is super flat that way, right? Like it is, there's not, like when you come out in an improv scene, hopefully, and you have an improv troupe, there's not a hierarchy of like, well, this is the leader of the troupe, and so they're gonna like declare what everything is about. So you are always co-creating. This is super interesting to me in my work at Mayo Clinic, because I am bringing that philosophy into a lot of my teaching. Like, we co-create, we build things together. And medical systems are explicitly hierarchical, like in a lot of ways that they're designed. So I have whole classes that I teach about this, and I could go on for a long time, but there's several questions. So I'll just say very quickly, the way that we practice this, and then we try and unpack it together, is doing exercises where you are co-creating with someone else, where you necessarily have to like give and take with the other person, and the goal has to be in that something that is bigger than either one of you, and you have to like work together to do that. So there's a super simple exercise you can actually do. Everybody could do this on the drive or bus ride home or whatever, which is like you and another person tell a story, but you can each only say one word at a time. And you just go back and forth. So it's like, once upon a time, there was a, and you just go back and forth. I love this exercise. I do it all the time. And there's lots could say, but to be brief, what this exercise, if you do it, like unveils or like shows very quickly is that you have to, in that exercise, constantly be kind of doing this dance of putting your idea forward and then also listening to like what the other person is giving. But at the end of the day, the two of you have to figure out a way that you're trying to like make the story or the sentence work together. And you figure out very quickly there's ways that like, that's kind of naturally uncomfortable at moments because you have in your brain like, well, she should have said goose right there. That would have been the funny thing to say. But she said door. Why? Like, but you have to be able to let go of that to some degree. Like you have to be able to let go. I know the right way for this to be from beginning to end. And rather say this story is bigger than any of us. I have a part to play in it and I am going to contribute something that's valuable, but that's different than me coming in and saying, here's how this is going to go, everybody, right? And it is a practice and it's a skill and it's a thing that's hard for everybody on some level, but it's something you can absolutely practice, and it is, and it's the last piece I'll just say in a very practical thing in terms of like how to do this out in the world is that you do probably need to have a conversation or have a thought about what are we trying to do here? Because if you've got like totally different ideas of like what you're actually trying to do here, then it's going to get real hard to like figure out how we're going to work together to do this thing. But if you're like, no, okay, our goal is this, and like we all agree on this, and then the hard part is like, how do I be okay with somebody else might have a very different idea of like how we get to that? How much can I like allow that to shape what I'm thinking, and are there ways that I can offer what I'm thinking and that can mold the other person? So again, there's like a whole other talk in that bring me back next year. Hi.
I've not heard a single person be here who hasn't made a statement, so I'm going to make a statement. The word that I've been hearing since the election is curious, and the day after the election, a person said in terms of conversation, be curious, not furious.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, good comment. All right.
Thank you, Tane. The story you were telling about the woman who, at the end of it, after being kind of grouchy,
Yeah.
and the end of it going, I can't believe there's all these people that thought like me.
Right into the mic.
About
Yeah.
when they said that I can't believe there's all these people that thought like I did.
Yeah.
At the end of all these events you had, was there like, and in the future you guys can share your phone numbers and,
that's great.
and get together every month or whatever?
That's a great question. So what is the follow-up to this? So the short answer is yes, that happens in these events. Like afterwards, people do exchange phone numbers, they keep talking. Sometimes it depended on the community. In some of the communities, there were organizations that like showed up and were like, oh, if you want to keep like meeting or being together, we have a breakfast group that meets, or we are volunteers like who do this kind of thing and you should come to this. So there is some of that. I will just give you a sneak peek that we are planning to do this project again in 2025. And we'll open it back up. And that's actually one of the things that we most want to like try and build out more is how can we help make sure that maybe there's some of that happens afterwards. I mean, it gets to be, the reason that it's a little tricky is because we don't want to do that work for communities because we don't think that works, right? Like, I don't think that us like coming in and being like, all right, we're gonna like set this up for you necessarily works, but we want to like invite the things that are already happening in those communities to be there and hopefully use this as sort of like a spark or a kindling for like continuing work from there.
And then one other thing, did you guys do one of those like survey things where people gave answers and you share that thing?
Yes, we have done that. We're literally, that survey data was actually just like, I got an email this week that we're like processing it. But I think just assume it's all great. Everybody loved it. No, I actually do think it was all very good, but we haven't we will have a way to share that out, but we aren't there yet. Hi.
The word, when you used the word cathartic, I thought, wow, why not apply this technique to therapy?
Yeah.
You know, and I think the beautiful thing about this, adding comedy to it, is that you're looking at the situation from a different paradigm, which a comedic paradigm.
Yeah.
And it could stimulate the brain to think from a different perspective, which could lead to creativity.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'll just use this as an excuse to say, like in the therapy or like the cathartic piece, one of my favorite quotes, Stephen Colbert has this quote where he says, it's basically impossible to laugh and be afraid at the same time. And so if you can, and this is like a thing that we think about like with the shows that we do, if we can create a space where people can honestly and genuinely like laugh together, I'm not saying that that's going to solve every issue, but I really do believe that that gives people a space to maybe drop some of the fear they might have with other people or things going on, and that might open a door for some of the other kinds of connection.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, just pick it up.
So right now is a really crucial time to have these critical conversations with people.
Yeah.
But because of these echo chambers that we've kind of fallen into with social media,
Right.
It feels like a lot of people aren't used to these conversations.
100%.
And now they view it as kind of like an attack on their views, and they become kind of combative. So I was wondering, one, how can we have these conversations and kind of navigate not getting to that point where the other person feels like we're attacking them? And two, once somebody becomes combative, do you have any tips on how to kind of reel it back and get them so that's like a conducive conversation?
Totally. That's a great question. So a couple things. I mean, it's kind of where I started with like that notion of like, the more that you can like genuinely try and come to it in a curious place and demonstrate to the other person, I honestly am like interested in like what you think and like where that comes from. And again, like I think that a lot of times the where some of that hostility comes out is that we will go into some of those conversations being like, I'm really curious, but like in some part of our brain we're like, I'm curious just enough so that I can convince you like how you're wrong. And like, again, people aren't dumb, like they can sense that, they know that, and so then their defenses are up about this. I'll just tell you, like, I mean, even like since the election, I've like kind of had a couple of exchanges with people where I've been on this kick. I've been like going and having these kinds of talks and like listening to and talking to people who think differently than you, who voted differently than you is like really important right now. And I have had people who've been like, no, it's not. It is absolutely the wrong thing to do. And, you know, there's a part where I had to like in a super meta way, like employ these exact techniques to have a conversation about having conversations with people. But in those cases, like there's one in particular like that where I had somebody really be like, you know, like you're like Tane, like you're naive and stupid for like kind of suggesting that you're going to go out and just like talk to people, and like the people that I know who like voted differently are all like dumb, like and stupid and blah blah blah. And so again, I had to kind of like take a step back, like and be like, okay, so like what, like you're like this is obviously like really important to you, but like. And when you are saying like the people who like voted like voted differently than you are like really dumb or bad, like what is it that you are sort of seeing? Is it just like the vote, or is there something more to it than that? And then that gave that person a little bit of a space to then they said a little bit more about some of the things they felt like they were seeing, like in what was going on in different communities in different parts of the country. And then I was like, okay, so you're seeing that, and like, I don't know, what is it that, you know, is you are seeing there that like feels like it's not working for you, and I kind of just kept trying to like ask this person questions, and eventually we got to this place, and I don't know if he like agreed with me that like going out and talking to everybody is like a good idea. But we did get to this place where I was able to say, listen, I totally hear you, like this is hard and this is challenging. And like, it does feel like people who see the world differently than you are like, can feel like they're on another planet sometimes, like potentially for some of us. But I don't know how, for me, I said, I don't know how to solve that other than going and listening and talking to those folks. And I've been listening to you and I hear you and I hear the frustration, and I just don't know, like for me, how I would like approach this other than like trying to like listen and understand, not necessarily agree, but like try and find like different ways to like hear somebody from a different point of view. And he, like to his credit, was like, I mean, I get that. Again, he didn't necessarily say like, you're right, like you should do that, but he's like, I get that. And so I think that like really leaning into the curiosity, asking other people questions, and in doing so, demonstrating like, I'm actually genuinely curious about what you believe and like where it comes from and what drives you, can really help with that. The last thing I'll say on this, just because like I think it's an important point, is that this can be tiring, like at times. And so I think that it's also a valuable thing for us all to like, you know, pace ourselves with it. Like, and you don't have to do it every hour of every day, right? Like you can do it in some places and then take a break and be like, you know, I'm gonna go do something that just feels good for me right now. But doing like, you know, giving yourself like that challenge to go out and do that, I think is really valuable, and really leaning into curiosity and asking good questions. And then the last piece, really honestly last piece, which is just a good piece of advice, is like being overly nice and polite, like whenever you can. Yeah, I know. Being overly nice and polite really helps, like, because it's harder for somebody. If you can try and be funny, but you have to be really careful. Anyway, so that's my thought.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. We're out of time, and I think we are.
Yeah, we are.
Tane has to leave in just a few minutes. He has another engagement. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I don't know, maybe pull you off for a second to say a couple more things, but thank you so much, Tane. This was wonderful. Good food for thought for all of us. And I want to thank everyone for being here. And stay around. We have snacks and drinks, and check out our literature and our merch here. And have a good rest of the weekend, everyone.
Yay! Oh, actually, I'll say one last thing, even though we're over time, because there were these calls at the top to like donate or support this organization, and nobody asked me to do this, but this is a totally true thing. I found running a small theater company through COVID and working with a lot of different organizations is like one of my truest principles in life is like support stuff that matters to you. Like go out and like make a donation, give a gift, like volunteer, because if I learned anything in the last like 4.5, 5 years, it's that like there's no guarantee that good stuff just kind of keeps happening. Like it happens because we step up and do it, and because we support it. And so if you were like thinking about it, if you're thinking about helping support like them get that staff person or making a donation for the refreshments here, like just do it. Like you will feel good, and it will make sure that this actually keeps going. So, you know, like see what's in your wallet. Yeah. It's actually Gustavus's like annual, yeah.